Some people don't know this, but most 3D anime games publish their models for free download. And on this channel, we take full advantage of that. So welcome to yet another episode where we look at these said models up close to learn from them and reverse engineer the possible methods used to create them. Whenever I boot into the wide open worlds of anime gacha, I'm amazed by what they're able to create by taking a primarily 2D art form and bringing it to life in 3D, especially when they create complex outfit and hair designs. Because when you load up the model to take a closer look, you'll be impressed to notice that the entire hair structure is one neatly closed mesh, and not a bunch of scattered, overlapping, and open hair strands that are common when people create their models with the path curves technique. Now, this isn't to say that technique is bad, because it's fast, intuitive, and for most hobby and freelance 3D modelers, it gets the job done. But there are many reasons where something like this is more optimized. It's a full hairstyle consisting of a single harmonized mesh. Not only does that look very polished and professional, but it's fundamentally airtight. A fully closed mesh is much easier to rig and won't ever fall victim to the various small issues that could occur when using unconnected open hair strands, such as export, lighting, and performance issues. And this is pretty much the standard if you're ever planning to work in said 3D anime game studios. But how do the pro 3D modelers do this? It might seem intimidating to create an object this complex. But here's a secret. Every complex object can be recreated in just 3 simple steps. If you can recognize the basic shapes of it, know how to make those shapes, and know how to combine those shapes, you can make anything you imagine. And I mean anything, not just hair. Now, while I don't claim that the method I'm about to show you is the exact one they use for their models, here's what I managed to create using a simple reverse engineered method, which similarly results in a single organized mesh. So I'll let you be the judge if this is suitable for your needs. So to begin, let's take note of a couple things. Cantarella's hairstyle is made up of 2 basic shapes and variations of them. Seriously. We've got the half sphere for the top of the hairstyle, and all of the hair strands are just glorified rectangles. And don't worry, we'll show you how to make those rectangles fancy. The only other thing to note for now is how the hair flows outward from this angle, but more importantly from this angle as well, giving enough clearance for the shoulders because these type of games don't usually rely on real-time hair physics, and so they commonly avoid clipping issues by just going away from the body. Now create a new project and spare the default cube because that's our best friend. Select it and add a subdivision surface modifier to it. Crank levels viewport up to 3 and apply. We've created a sphere that is better than the stock sphere that Blender creates because it has better topology. Press Alt-Z to toggle transparency, press Tab to enter edit mode, and now select and delete the bottom half of the sphere as well as one side of it. What we're left with is the base for the back half of the hairstyle. Now Alt-left click the bottom of it and press E and drag that down to extrude it. Then press Ctrl-R to create a loop cut around this area. Now press 2, which will switch edit mode from vertices to edge mode, and while holding shift, select these edges. Next press V, and this will split those edges off, thus creating separate hair strands. Pull up your search function, which is either F3 or spacebar depending on your version, and look for a function called extrude faces along normals, then drag it inwards. So now our hair base is no longer flat. Now let's separate these hair strands from the base by selecting this edge and pressing V again. Select everything, then press P to bring up the separate menu and select separate by loose parts. Now we've got separate strands to work with and we can work on them one at a time. For this strand, I'll press Ctrl-R, drag my scroll wheel up until there's 3 loop cuts, splitting it into 4 segments, then I'll select the bottom and merge it so that it creates that point. Let's loop cut one more time and drag this one all the way down, using Alt left click and GG to slide it. Let's give our hair strand some volume by pressing S plus a dimension to scale it along the axis. I do this along both the X and Y axis, so it has volume from the back and the sides. And now I'm going to create a lot more loop cuts, around 10 to 15 for each segment. Add slightly more or less depending on how much detail will be in that specific part of the strand. I planned that the tip will be curved, and so when we sculpt it, we'll need more geometry in that area. Now, I said I'd tell you how to make these strands fancy and do things like twists and curves. So Alt left click this top edge and search for the function cursor to selected. Tab back into object mode, and while that strand is selected, press Ctrl A, then select all transforms to apply all the transforms. Then search for the function origin to cursor. This sets the origin point to the top of the strand, and now on the right hand side, add a modifier to it called simple deform. Select Z as the axis, and now you can see that the hair strand is slightly twisted, and you can adjust how much it twists by increasing or decreasing the angle. And when you're happy with the results, you can click that right drop down arrow and apply the modifier. Now let's go over to sculpt mode. Press G to select your grab tool, and we will now begin to work on this. Like we mentioned earlier, the back hair will go outwards and downwards to be able to clear the shoulders. So get sculpting with that grab brush and use the bracket buttons to change the brush radius, tweaking them exactly how you want to. Now I'm doing it from the side. And I suggest not only looking at from the back and the side, but in the in-between angles as well, so that you can see how it looks from every angle and ensure it looks good from every angle. I'm now tweaking the tip, pause, but this is why multiple loop cuts in that area comes in handy, so that that small part can stay malleable. Now I usually don't join all my strands until later, but I'll show you how to do it now. Basically select both edge loops where it would connect, so the top of the hair strand and the bottom of the base. Then search for the function bridge edge loops. What I like to do is select this middle edge and dissolve it, not delete it, sorry. And then re-add that loop cut so that it's just a smoother transition. In object mode, I did shade smooth by angle. Not really necessary, but it looks nice. Now you only need to know one more thing, which is how to create offshoot strands, which are just the strands originating from a strand. I'll start by making one near the top of this hair strand, pressing 3 to enter face select mode and deleting a face where I want it to originate from. Press 1 to go back to vertice mode and select the 2 top vertices of that open face. Then press E to extrude it down diagonally. Add a loop cut to it if you want to maintain quads, and select all 4 points of it and press F to create faces on both sides of it. This creates the opening for your offshoot strand, which you can just extrude out of. And then you just follow the same steps as before, which were separating the strand, loop cutting it, merging the end, then adding volume to it by scaling on the sides and back, loop cutting it some more. Then if you want to twist it, you gotta set the origin point as we showed you, add the simple deform modifier, tweak it how you want it to, then head over to sculpt mode and start sculpting it just like we did to the other one. Taking note of the outward and downward direction as we mentioned, and avoid clipping with the other hair strands, unless you intentionally want to do that. And when you're done, bridge edge loops, and then adjust the transition. Do this for each opening until you get a full hairstyle. You can create each strand individually, or you can duplicate strands if you want. For the front half, it's the same thing. You can even duplicate your back hair base. Just note that at the front, around this area is where you'll want to cut off. And these are my usual cutoffs for the front of the hair and the side parts of the hair. And it'll just be the same thing. You create openings at the top, you extrude out of those openings, and let me show you how I usually do my front strands. Starting off with, of course, your basic rectangular prism, and then I can usually go into sculpt mode, create a curvature from the front and from the side as well. Usually following the shape of the sphere. I'm gonna dissolve this one edge right here to create the slope that I want. And that's good for a single front strand, but you can also split it like this using V. Tweak this side so that it becomes a split strand with 2 pointy edges. Then you can select 2 bottom vertices from the open face and spam the F key until it's all closed up. Make sure you bring the tips closer together from the side as well. Now, if your edges end up looking crooked, you can use the relax tool. This will get you a nice clean curve. And if you can't find the relax tool, then it's you that needs to relax, because you just need to go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, search for Loop Tools, and just tick this box. Then in your edit bar on the right hand side, you can find Loop Tools and Relax here, where you can just add it to your quick favorites. So now that you have pretty much all the tools you need to create your own hairstyle, let me walk you through what I did for my project. I've got the base created, and now I'm creating my first strand. And for this particular case, I'm using proportional editing to add more volume towards the bottom. Then I go ahead and add the loop cuts and set the origin and do my twisting and sculpting. This one won't be as twisted as the example I showed you earlier. Just gonna mirror it to the other side with a mirror modifier, because most of this hairstyle will be symmetrical. Then I add another strand. We'll speed through this a little more because it's the same process as before. Then I'm gonna split this strand, selecting this edge and using V to split and F to fill in the faces. Let's branch off this strand here, creating the opening for the new strand. And for this one, I'll just duplicate from here to keep that same curve and extrude it. Let's make sure to open that face so that we don't have interior faces. And we'll also twist this one very slightly. Then sculpt to make the final adjustments before we connect it. Then after some final tweaks to make sure that it transitions, I moved on to the front, and as I showed you, it's the same process for creating the side and front strands. It's the same concepts, just smaller strands. To break the form up a little, I also originated a strand from a little higher up so that it doesn't look too mechanical. And one other thing you can do to change up the hair forms a little, you can extrude certain parts like this and then merge it down here. And this creates that little detail where we can then sculpt it at the top. Then I move this hairstyle onto the face and body mesh that it's actually supposed to be used on. So sorry for that jarring transition, but now I'm gonna work on filling out the back. So I duplicate one of the hair strands and just rotate it to match the orientation of the root. Again, to add some flavor to it, let's make this strand a little different by having it go towards the middle where it's held together by an ornament. I like to sketch out where to add more strands, see where I can fill in these gaps and add more detail. And before we go further, there's an important step. So let's quickly talk about seams. It's best you do this as you go along and before you merge everything down, because that will make things easier. If you wait until everything's cluttered, it could be disorganized and you'll have a hard time going back and making sure everything has its seams. So it's recommended you do it as you go along. And as you can see, each individual strand will be seamed at the root as well as front to back. This will make texturing much more convenient later. And let me show you how to set that up. Let's clear the seams. For the top, you can Alt left click the edge and just search for mark seam, or it's also here on edge, mark seam. Then I also do these two edges and make sure it's closed at the bottom here. This separates the back of the strand from the front of the strand so that you can easily paint the back different from the front, because the back is usually in some kind of shadow. So here on the offshoot, it's the same concept. Let's start with the back of the strand, separating it from the front. And if your strands are only one face wide, you'll have to use edge select mode. So you can click that or press 2. Because if you don't, and you stay in this mode, when you select both of these edges, guess what? It's gonna mark all of those in between, and that's why it's better in edge select mode. Don't forget this at the bottom. And again, we separate at the root as well. So here, you'd select these edges and mark seam. And you're good to go. As a final check, you can do a quick unwrap to make sure all of the islands are separate and you don't have any weird UV islands that are like circular. If I were intentionally to break these seams, let's just clear all the seams and re-unwrap it. This is what it would look like, and you cannot texture that. And this is what happens if one of the offshoot strands are not seamed correctly. To fill in the hairstyle and make it feel complete, I have to add more strands and vary them. So I add medium-sized strands to the large strands, give them lower and higher insertion points. I add more pointed edge strands so that it has both the chopped ends and the pointy ends, which go nice together. And some varying curves as well that don't always go exactly with the existing curves, and this creates a bit of organized chaos that brings the hairstyle to life. Let's add a secondary loop to her middle strand, or the one that connects in the middle, using the duplicate and extrude technique. Sculpt it so that it gets closer to the base. And the reason I leave most of these uncombined until the very end, there's a lot of sculpting tweaks to be made at this stage, which gets harder if they're already combined. Don't forget to add branching strands to the inner part of the hair as well, otherwise it could look a little weird. So I add a pair of inner strands to the back of the hair and one to the front of the hair as well. One part you also have to be wary of is near the face. You will want to cover up that scalp area with some strands as well, and or put a hair net around that area so it doesn't look bare. So this inner strand I made is for that purpose, to occlude that area from these bottom angles. And of course you'll want some asymmetrical strands as well that are not mirrored. As we mentioned in the last video, they do have these individual strands. And later down the road, you also want to go and sculpt the mirrored strands so that they're different sizes, and that kind of gives the illusion that they're not fully mirrored. And now it's time to combine. Earlier I showed you how to combine them and how to do the seams after you combine them, so be sure to follow that. The only real other thing to note here is, optionally you can combine everything that is mirrored first, and then UV unwrap them so they take up half the UVs, and when you texture them, you're texturing both sides of the mirrored strands at once. And then after is when you sculpt the sizes and add the individual asymmetrical strands. One thing I should also mention, I combine all the back hairs first with the back half of the base, and the front hairs with the front base. This helps me work on the inner strands for the front and the back halves of the hair, and it also helps to hide one half of the hair when I am looking at the other half to check for seam errors. So here, hiding the back half so that I can see the entire back of the front half. And you can see on the left I've unwrapped them to do my unwrap check. And I saw that some islands were still unresolved, so I went back and painstakingly found the seams that were missing. Once you've done most of your combining, it's extremely satisfying to see all of those open strands coming together into one single organized object. And for me, that was worth the entire process. Next, let me take you through a common issues check. Especially during my first time making these kinds of meshes, there were a lot of problems that can be easily solved with three things. First is select everything with A, press M, and do merge by distance. This will remove any accidentally duplicated vertices, and as you can see at the bottom it said, It removed 79 vertices, so this is common when you accidentally duplicate part of your mesh, or you extrude it, that creates duplicated meshes at certain areas. Another thing to check for is face orientation. So here I've intentionally made some faces face the wrong way, but this is common when you extrude and when you create faces, it sometimes creates it the wrong way. So what you can do is, again, select everything and do recalculate outside. So it'll fix those areas, and then when you go back, you'll see that everything is one color. And the only reason it's different, like this part is red and this part is blue, is because this is using a solidify outline, which uses backface. So that's why it's flipped. And the last thing you can do is deselect everything and search for non-manifold. It's gonna select all of the vertices that are non-manifold, and I've planted a couple of suspects here. It will find any loose vertices for you, and then you can delete them or resolve them as you wish. And that'll be pretty much it for this video. It's 90% complete. I just have to add the asymmetrical strands. Then I'm gonna sculpt and make it more asymmetrical between the two halves. And the hair's not yet textured, it's using a gradient shader, so I'll show you how to do that before I go. We still have to add more detail via texture, but this will do for now because it's a nice base. So to achieve this, I first created an object. It's just an axis. Insert a plain axis into the scene. And this dot product that you see is actually a vector math node that's just set to dot product. So you create a texture coordinate node, you plug in the axes, and you plug in the object of the texture coordinate into the top vector, of the dot product, and you create a geometry node and take its position and put it into the bottom vector of the dot product. Plug that into a color ramp, which you create your gradient. Very common to use a color gradient for anime gacha hairstyles. And you tweak this object's position, and that'll let you set the position of the gradient how you want. If you don't care about the shadows, you can just end that here, and you still have that nice gradient. But if you want to add the shadows, the rest of this shader is basically just this copied and then mixed together with a mixed color shader. So the mixed color shader is set to multiply for the shadows. Oops, this is actually wrong. So the way this is set up, this is the base color. This is the shadow, so it gets darker from top to bottom. Yep, that's the one that controls the shadow that goes from top to bottom. And this one at the bottom is what controls the inner shadow, so that inside it's darker. And I placed that point so that it would hit and create shadows at the back of the hairstyle, but not, on the outside. The next step would be to just UV unwrap it, bake all of this, then go over it, hand paint it in the texture. But that's a whole nother can of worms for another video. And we're eventually going to do a video for this entire character, which is going to be using all of the techniques we learned from reverse engineering the Pro 3D models. So if you found this helpful, you might want to subscribe because we got a lot more coming up, and we'll try to replicate everything that they do. Thanks for watching, and have yourselves a good night.